Whispers in the bookstore. The first snow of December fell gently on the windshield of the blue sedan parked behind Horizon Community Center. Inside, Elise Bennett shifted uncomfortably, trying to find a position that wouldn't leave her back aching. By morning, 32, she never imagined her bed would be the reclined driver's seat of a 15-year-old car. Her possessions reduced to what fit in the trunk and back seat. 8 months ago, she had been an associate architect at a prestigious firm with an apartment overlooking the river and savings that felt secure. Then came her mother's cancer diagnosis, the medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover, and finally the economic downturn that led to layoffs. Her mother had passed away despite everything, leaving Elise with grief, debt, and eventually nowhere. To call home, she pulled her coat tighter as the temperature dropped. The community center allowed her to use their shower facilities in the mornings before they opened. A kindness from the director who had caught her washing up in a public restroom last month. Pride had once kept her from accepting help. Had taught her otherwise. Morning came with frost patterns on the windows and the familiar gnawing of hunger. Elise gathered her small toiletry bag and walked to the back entrance of the community center where Josephine, the elderly caretaker, would be arriving to open up. "Cold one today," Josephine commented, unlocking the door with arthritic fingers. "There's some leftover pastries from yesterday's event in the staff room. Help yourself after you're done." Elise nodded gratefully. After a quick shower and change, into her cleanest outfit, dark jeans and a sweater that had once been expensive, she allowed herself to pastries, saving one in her bag for later. With 3 hours before her shift at the coffee shop began, she walked 6 blocks to Blackwell's. Books, an old establishment with worn wooden floors and the permanent scent of paper and vanilla. The owner, an elderly man named Harold, never minded when she spent hours reading without purchasing anything. Today, she headed for the architecture section, where she could momentarily reclaim a piece of her former life through the pages of Designs and Buildings. The bell above the door jingled as someone entered, but Elise remained absorbed in a book about sustainable urban design. She didn't notice the tall figure browsing nearby until he spoke. "That's an interesting choice. Thinking of building something." She looked up, startled. The man before her was perhaps in his late 30s, with thoughtful hazel eyes behind simple glasses and the kind of casual clothing that somehow still looked expensive. "Just remembering," she replied, closing the book carefully. "I used to be an architect." "Used to be?" His eyebrows raised slightly. "Life happens," she said with a small shrug, sliding the book back onto the shelf. "Do you have an interest in architecture?" He smiled, a genuine expression that softened his serious face. "I should. My grandfather built half the bridges in this city." Nathaniel Reed, he introduced himself, extending his hand. Elise Bennett. His handshake was warm, his palm callus-free. A man who worked with his mind, not his hands.
She
Echoed, as in Reed Technologies. "Guilty as charged," he admitted, "though I prefer being known for what I build rather than my family name." Elise nodded, suddenly aware of the vast distance between them. Reed Technologies was a multi-billion-dollar company. She had $7.32 in her pocket. "I should get going," she said, glancing at her watch. "My shift starts soon." "Where do you work, if you don't mind my asking?" "Brood Awakening, over on 7th Street. I know it well." Their raspberry scones are unmatched. An awkward silence fell. Between them, the pause of two people from different worlds finding an unexpected connection. "Mr. Reed," called Harold from behind the counter, "your grandfather's first edition is ready." "Thank you." Nathaniel turned back to Elise. "It was nice meeting you, Elise Bennett, former architect." "You too, Mr. Reed." "Nathaniel, please." Nodded, watching as he walked away, struck by the strange encounter. As she gathered her bag to leave, she noticed he had left something on the shelf, a business card with a handwritten note on the back. "If architecture ever calls you back, Reed Foundation funds, design scholarships." Annalise slipped the card into her pocket, a small warmth blooming in her chest, despite the cold that awaited her outside. Paper cranes and second chances of the coffee shop hummed with the midday rush as Elise balanced 3 plates along her forearm, delivering them to a table of business people who barely glanced up from their devices. Her feet ached after 6 hours. of standing, but her shift wouldn't end for another 2. The manager had called in sick, which meant extra hours and thankfully extra pay. As she refilled the napkin dispensers, the bell above the door chimed. Nathaniel Reed walked in, scanning the cafe until his eyes found her. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by a smile. He joined the line, and when he reached the counter, Elise was there to take his order. Raspberry scone and black. Coffee, she suggested, remembering their conversation from the bookstore 3 days ago. You have a good memory, he said, looking genuinely impressed. But make it a chai latte instead. Coffee makes me too wired after noon. She rang up his order, aware of how different she looked in her coffee-stained apron compared to the woman he'd met among the architecture books for Here or To Go. For Here, I have some work to catch up on. He glanced at the half-empty cafe. Unless you're closing soon? Not for hours, she replied, accepting his payment and returning his change. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she noticed a small ink stain on his hand. Are you an artist as well as a tech mogul? He looked down at his hand and chuckled. Hardly. My niece is teaching me to fold origami. Turns out paper cranes are much harder than they look. The image of this serious man folding delicate paper birds made Elise smile genuinely for the first time that day. There's a trick to it, my mother taught me when I was little. Perhaps you could give lessons, he said lightly, then moved to a corner table by the window. When the rush subsided, Elise found herself watching him work. He wasn't like the other businessmen who came in, the ones who spoke too loudly on phone calls or snapped their fingers for service. Instead, he worked quietly, occasionally looking out the window as if gathering thoughts. During her break, she folded a napkin into a simple crane and on impulse walked it over to his table. Free lesson, she said, placing the paper bird beside his empty plate. Nathaniel picked it up, turning it carefully in his hands. This is incredible. You did this with a napkin? You can make them out of almost anything flat, she explained. Bus tickets, receipts. My mom and I used to fold them from the pages of old magazines when I was a kid. Why cranes specifically? There's a Japanese tradition that if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, your wish will come true. She smiled wryly. Oh, I haven't tested that theory personally. What would you wish for? His question was gentle, curious without being intrusive. Elise considered for a moment. Stability, she finally said. Not wealth, just knowing where I'll sleep next month. Something shifted in his expression, not pity, which she would have hated, but a deepening awareness. Before he could respond, her manager called her back. To work, thanks for the crane, Nathaniel said as she turned to leave. It's perfect. The following Tuesday, Elise spent her afternoon off at the community center, where she had started volunteering in exchange for occasional use of their facilities. The center was running a program for local children, teaching basic skills to those whose parents worked long hours. Today's session was about creativity and problem solving. Miss Elise, can you help me? Small girl with braids tugged at her sleeve. I can't make my building stand up. Elise knelt beside the child's construction of cardboard and tape. Let's think about this like architects. What makes buildings strong? She guided the girl through basic structural principles. Using simple language and demonstrations, she felt a spark of her old passion returning. Soon, several children had gathered around, fascinated by her explanations of weight distribution and support systems. That was quite impressive. Elise turned to find Josephine standing with Nathaniel Reed beside her, who wore casual clothes jeans and a simple sweater but still managed to look out of place among the worn furniture and patched walls of the center. Mr. Reed is one of our donors, Josephine explained. He's touring the facilities today. Just Nathaniel, please, he reminded them. I didn't expect to find an architecture lesson in progress. Elise brushed dust from her knees as she stood. It's just basic physics. Children understand more than we give them credit for. The Reed Foundation is considering expanding our educational programs, Josephine continued. Perhaps Ms. Bennett could share some ideas. She has a wonderful way with the children. Before Elise could protest, Josephine was called away, leaving them in an awkward silence. I didn't know you volunteered here, Nathaniel said finally. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, Elise replied, unwilling to explain further. walked toward the small garden area where some children were planting seeds in paper cups. Nathaniel seemed genuinely interested in the center's activities, asking thoughtful questions about the programs and needs. "You seem different here," Elise observed, as they watched the children work. "Less ... corporate." He laughed softly. "That a compliment or an observation? Both, I think." She paused. "Why this place?" "There must be more prestigious charities vying for Reed Foundation money." "My mother grew up in this neighborhood," he said, surprising her. "Before my grandfather's, business took off. She never let us forget where we came from." He looked around at the worn but lovingly maintained center. "Places like this matter. They're the difference between having a chance and having none." For the first time, Elise saw beyond the wealthy businessman to someone more complex. Someone who might understand more than she'd given him credit for. As they parted ways that evening, Nathaniel handed her a small box. "A thank you for the origami lesson." Inside was a set of beautiful origami papers in vibrant colors and patterns. Simple card read, "For your next 1,000 cranes." Whatever you wish for. The gift wasn't expensive enough to embarrass her, but thoughtful enough to matter. Elise watched his car pull away, the papers clutched in her hand, wondering what it meant that this man from another world seemed to see her more clearly than anyone had in a very long time. Bridges built from trust. The January. Rain pattered against the windows of Blackwell's books as Elise sheltered in the architecture section. Her favorite refuge on her day off. Her situation had marginally improved. The community center had offered her part-time work coordinating their children's programs. The position came with a small stipend, not enough to afford an apartment, but sufficient to occasionally sleep in a hostel when the winter nights grew unbearable. She'd been avoiding the coffee shop where Nathaniel might appear, unsure how to navigate the tentative connection between them. The origami papers he'd given her remained untouched in her car. It's too precious to use yet. The bookstore's bell jingled, and Harold's warm voice carried through the shelves. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reed. Looking for anything specific today?" Elise froze, gripping the book in her hands. Part of her wanted to slip away unseen. Another part longed for the ease of conversation they'd shared at the community center. "Just browsing today, Harold," Nathaniel replied. "Though I'm hoping to find something on urban revitalization projects." "Architecture section, far left corner," Harold directed. Footsteps approached, and then Nathaniel appeared at the end of the aisle, his coat damp from rain. When he saw her, surprise gave way to a genuine smile. "We seem destined to meet among books," he said, approaching slowly as if giving her space to retreat. "Urban revitalization?" she asked, gesturing to Harold's direction. "Research for a new project." He glanced at the book in her hands. "And you?" She showed him the cover. "Historic preservation in modern cities." "Professional interest or personal?" "Passion, both," she admitted. "I specialized in adaptive reuse, giving old buildings new purpose without destroying their character." Nathaniel's expression brightened. "That's exactly what I'm researching. Reed Technologies is considering moving our headquarters from the glass tower downtown to the old Westbrook manufacturing complex." "The textile mill?" Elise couldn't hide her excitement. "That's a stunning example of industrial architecture. Those brick walls and timber beams have incredible potential." "I was hoping you might say that," he hesitated. "Would you consider taking a look at the property with me? Professionally speaking, the foundation would compensate you for your time, of course." The offer stunned her. "I don't have a license anymore," she said carefully. "I couldn't sign off on anything. I'm not looking for official paperwork. Just your perspective." His expression was earnest. "You see things differently than the corporate architects we've consulted." Pride made her want to refuse charity, but practicality and curiosity about the old mill won out. "When tomorrow afternoon? I can pick you up." The question highlighted the reality of her situation. "I'll meet you there," she countered. "Text me the address." They exchanged phone numbers, and Elise felt a strange flutter as his name appeared in her contacts. List a digital connection to a world that felt increasingly distant from her own. The following day, Elise arrived at the Westbrook complex 15 minutes early, wanting time to absorb the building's presence. The massive brick structure had stood empty for nearly a decade, windows boarded, loading docks silent. Yet even in abandonment, it possessed a dignity that modern glass towers lacked. A sleek car pulled up. Nathaniel emerged, dressed in work boots and jeans rather than his usual business attire. He carried a hard hat under one arm and offered another to her. "Safety first," he explained, leading her toward a side entrance where a construction foreman waited inside. The mill opened into a cathedral of industrial space soaring ceilings. Supported by timber columns, light filtering through dirt-streaked windows, wooden floors worn smooth by generations of workers. Elise moved through the space reverently, touching brick walls and tracing the grain of old wood. "What do you see?" Nathaniel asked, watching her with genuine interest. "Possibility," she replied, her voice echoing slightly. "These spaces tell stories. Good design honors that while creating something new, as they explored the 5-story complex." Elise found herself sketching ideas on a notepad. Nathaniel provided open workspaces that preserved the mill's flow. Conference rooms tucked into former offices, a central atrium where machinery once stood. "The neighborhood is economically depressed," Nathaniel explained as they reached the top floor. "Moving our headquarters here could bring jobs, but I'm concerned about gentrification pushing out current residents." His awareness of the impact surprised her. That's not usually a tech CEO's primary concern. Maybe it should be. He leaned against a windowsill, looking out at the modest homes surrounding the mill. "My grandfather built bridges because they connected people. What's the point of success if it only widens the gaps?" For the first time, Elise saw beyond Nathaniel's privilege to the weight he carried, the responsibility of wealth and influence. The desire to do something meaningful with it. "You could include community spaces," she suggested. "Skills training. Center, affordable childcare facilities, small business incubators. Make the building a bridge between your company and the neighborhood." His eyes lit up. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need." He studied her for a moment. "Elise, would you consider consulting on this project? Properly compensated with a contract through the foundation?" The offer was both thrilling and terrifying. "Why me? You have access to the best firms in the country?" They all proposed the same sterile corporate environments. Frustration edged his voice. "You understand that buildings need to serve people, not the other way around." Before she could respond, his phone rang. The conversation was brief but clearly tense. "Problem?" she asked when he hung up. "Investors getting nervous? Some think this project is a waste of resources." He sighed, suddenly looking tired. "The board meeting tomorrow could be difficult. You don't seem like someone who backs down easily." "No, but I'm also not the sole decision maker." He pocketed his phone. "Sometimes I envy the simplicity of your life." The comment stung, however. "Unintentional. Simple isn't the word I'd use for homelessness, Nathaniel." His expression fell. "That was incredibly insensitive. I'm sorry, it's fine." She turned away, examining a timber beam. "No, it's not." Moved to stand beside her. "I oversimplified your struggles because they're different from mine. That was wrong." His willingness to acknowledge the mistake without defensiveness disarmed her. They stood in silence until Elise spoke again. "For what it's worth, I think this project matters. It could change how businesses interact with communities. Will you help?" He asked quietly. She thought of the car she called home, the architecture career she'd lost, and this unexpected opportunity to reconnect with her passion. "Yes," she finally said. "But I work as an equal, not a charity case. I wouldn't want it any other way." He extended his hand, and when she took it, something shifted between them, a bridge of mutual respect forming across the divide of their circumstances. As they walked back through the echoing mill, Elise found herself sharing ideas freely, her professional confidence returning with each step. And Nathaniel listened intently, seeing not the homeless woman he'd met in a bookstore, but a skilled architect whose perspective might help him build something truly meaningful. The weight of expectations, the conference room of Reed Technologies' downtown headquarters gleamed with polished surfaces and floor-to-ceiling windows. Elise sat at the massive table, acutely aware of her second-hand blazer and the curious glances from board members as they filed in. The project contract had provided enough for her to rent a small room and a shared house, a roof, finally, but far from stability. For 6 weeks, She had thrown herself into developing proposals for the Westbrook mill conversion. Working from a corner desk at the community center, she'd created designs that balanced corporate needs with community integration. Today would be her first formal presentation to the full board. Nathaniel entered last, nodding encouragingly to her before taking his seat at the head of the table. The easy rapport they'd developed during their work sessions felt strained in this environment, as if the corporate setting had reinstated the boundaries between them. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, "You've all received the preliminary designs for the Westbrook project. Today, our consulting architect, Elise Bennett, will walk us through the vision and address your questions." Elise stood, distributing additional materials as she began her presentation. She highlighted the historical significance of the mill, the potential for innovative workspace design, and most importantly, the community integration features training facilities, affordable childcare, and incubator spaces for local entrepreneurs. The projected costs are outlined on page 12, she concluded. While the initial investment exceeds a new construction by approximately 18%, this tax incentives for historical preservation and community development bring the effective cost differential down to under 7%. A silver-haired man, Victor Harrington, Nathaniel, had warned her about him, tapped his pen impatiently. "Impressive presentation, Ms. Bennett. But this isn't a charity. Reed Technologies needs efficient modern facilities that project success, not some community center." "With respect, Mr. Harrington," she countered, "this design provides both. The workspaces exceed current industry standards for employee satisfaction while creating sustainable community relationships that will benefit recruitment and retention. In your qualifications for making these assessments," his tone was dismissive, "your resume shows a rather interrupted career path." The room tensed. Nathaniel straightened, but Elise spoke before he could intervene. "My circumstances changed, but my expertise didn't." She met Harrington's gaze steadily. "Sometimes interruptions provide perspective that consistency cannot." Another board member, Patricia Chen, leaned forward. "I'm more concerned about the community elements. Will our employees feel comfortable with public spaces integrated into their workplace? The design maintains security while creating controlled points of interaction," Elise explained, flipping to the relevant diagrams. "Studies show that diverse environments actually stimulate innovation." The questions continued, some genuinely curious, others thinly veiled challenges to her credibility. Throughout, Nathaniel remained supportive but professional, never undermining the board's concerns nor overly defending her. This was her professional moment, and he respected it enough to let her stand on her own merits. When the meeting concluded, the board voted to continue exploring the Westbrook project, requesting some modifications to Elise's designs. It wasn't outright approval, but it wasn't rejection either. "You were remarkable in there," Nathaniel said as they walked toward the elevator. "Harrington usually eats consultants alive." "I've faced worse than boardroom skeptics," she replied with a small smile. "Join me for dinner to celebrate getting through the first hurdle?" The invitation hung between them, carrying weight beyond a professional celebration. Before she could answer, Victor Harrington approached, falling into step beside them. "Nathaniel, a word." He nodded curtly to Elise. "Privately." "I'll be in touch about the revisions," she said, stepping away to give them space. As she waited for the elevator, she couldn't help overhearing Harrington's lowered voice, becoming a distraction. "The board is concerned about your judgment. First, this mill project, now bringing in someone with her background." The elevator arrived, mercifully cutting off the rest of the conversation. Elise rode down alone, a hollow feeling expanding in her chest. The reality of their different worlds had never felt more apparent. Outside, spring rain fell gently on the city streets. Elise walked without destination, processing the meeting in Harrington's words. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel. "Dinner still stands. No business talk. Just food and maybe some paper crane folding." She smiled despite herself but didn't reply immediately. The line between their professional relationship and something more personal had been blurring, and she wasn't sure either of them was prepared for what crossing it might mean. That evening, Elise sat in her rented room, working on design revisions. When a knock came at her door, She opened it to find Nathaniel, holding a takeout bag from an upscale restaurant. "You didn't answer my text," he said simply. "Thought maybe you were too busy working to remember dinner." "How did you know where I live?" she asked, surprised. The contract paperwork looked suddenly uncertain. "This is inappropriate, isn't it?" I should have waited for you to respond." He was right, it was presumptuous. But the gesture touched her nonetheless. "Since you're here with food that smells amazing, I'll overlook the boundary crossing this time." They ate at her small desk, discussing everything except the project or their complicated connection. He told her about his niece's science fair project. She shared stories about the children at the community center. For a few hours, the weight of expectations lifted. As he prepared to leave, Nathaniel hesitated. "I heard what Harrington said about you being a distraction. It's fine. I've been judged for worse things than my resume gaps. It's not fine." His voice was firm. "Your work stands on its own merit. The board will see that eventually. Will they?" she challenged gently. "Will they always see me as the charity case you brought in? The homeless woman you're trying to save?" Its expression shifted. "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what this is, Nathaniel." She gestured between them. "We work well together professionally, but there's something else happening. It's complicated by the power imbalance. You have to see that. I see a brilliant architect who challenges me to think differently." He stepped closer. "Yes, I want to help you, but not because I pity you. Because you deserve the chance to rebuild." "And what about rebuilding yourself?" she asked quietly. "The board wasn't just questioning my credentials today. They were questioning your judgment, your priorities." He ran a hand through his hair. Frustration evident. Maybe they should. Maybe Reed Technologies needs to change direction. "Be careful," she warned. "This project matters to the community, but it's your legacy at stake too. Don't jeopardize that because of whatever this is between us." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings and practical realities, and Nathaniel stepped back. "The revisions can wait until tomorrow," he said. "Get some rest at least." After he left, she stood at the window watching him walk to his car in the rain. Despite the modest improvements in her circumstances, the distance between their worlds felt insurmountable tonight. She had started to care for him more than was wise, more than was safe for her barely reconstructed life. Turning back to her desk, she'd picked up one of the origami papers he'd given her months ago. Carefully, she folded it into a cranda. First of 1,000, perhaps. A wish taking shape. Even as she told herself, some wishes were too complicated to come true. Foundations of something real summer heat shimmered above the Westbrook Mill's roof as construction crews worked below. From her temporary office in a trailer at the edge of the site, Elise watched the transformation with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The board had approved the project 3 months ago, with most of her community-focused elements intact. It was the most significant achievement of her professional life and, possibly, the end of her time with Nathaniel Reed. Their relationship had settled into careful professionalism since that rainy night in her rented room. They worked efficiently. Together, respecting each other's expertise, but the personal connection had been deliberately muted. Occasionally, she would catch him watching her with an expression that suggested unfinished conversations. But neither of them broached the subject again. Her contract would conclude when construction reached the second phase. It's just 2 weeks away. The architectural firm handling implementation would take over, and Elise would need to find her next opportunity. She had options now. Her work on the mill project had attracted attention. To smaller firms had made tentative offers. Her life was rebuilding, piece by piece. A knock on the trailer door interrupted her thoughts. Josephine from the community center entered, followed by a group of teenagers from the neighborhood. "Hope we're not disturbing you," Josephine said. "These young people wanted to see the project they've been hearing so much about." "Perfect timing for a tour," Elise replied, gathering hard hats for the group as she guided them through the partially renovated mill, explaining the design choices. In community spaces, she saw their initial skepticism transform into genuine interest. One boy, Darius, asked particularly insightful questions about the structural supports and historical preservation methods. "You have an architect's eye," she told him, as they examined the restored timber beams. "My grandfather worked here before." "It closed," he replied. "Said it was built to last forever if people cared enough to maintain it." Your grandfather was right, came Nathaniel's voice from behind them. He had arrived unannounced, dressed for the construction site in jeans and a simple button-down. Buildings, like communities, thrive when people invest in them. He joined their tours, adding context about the technologies that would be developed. In the spaces and the training programs that would be offered to local residents, the teens responded to his genuine interest, their guard lowering as they realized he wasn't just another wealthy outsider. When the group departed, Nathaniel lingered. They seemed impressed, especially that young man who kept asking about the load-bearing walls, Darius. He has natural talent for spatial reasoning. She hesitated. The community center can't afford architecture camps, but with some guidance. Consider it done. He smiled at her raised eyebrow. It's not charity investment. Talent like that deserves cultivation. They walked through the cavernous main floor, now partially framed for the offices and collaboration spaces that would soon fill it. Workers called greetings to both of them over the months. Elise had earned their respect with her practical knowledge and willingness to listen to their insights. The board meeting went well yesterday, Nathaniel said as they reached the future atrium. The Westbrook project is now officially the template for all future Reed Technologies expansions. That's wonderful news, she replied, genuinely pleased. Harrington must have been thrilled, Nathaniel laughed. Actually, he's taken early retirement. Apparently, the company's new direction requires more adaptable leadership. I'm sorry if I contributed to that friction. Don't be. It was inevitable. Paused by a window overlooking the neighborhood. The company needed to evolve. I needed to evolve. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. What's going on, Nathaniel?
What?
You didn't come here just to share board meeting updates? He turned to face her fully. Your contract ends next week. I know. She kept her voice neutral, professional. The transition plan is already in place with Wellington Architects. I'd like to offer you a different position. He handed her a folder. Director of Community Integration for the Reed Foundation, overseeing the implementation of the community spaces here and developing similar programs for our other locations. Elise opened the folder, scanning the job description and the generous salary figure. This is ... unexpected, is it? He asked quietly. We're the most qualified person I know for this role. You understand both the architectural and human elements. The fact that we have a complicated personal history, that's a separate conversation. His gaze was steady. This offer stands regardless of that conversation's outcome. She closed the folder, weighing her response carefully. I need to think about it. The timing feels ... significant. Take all the time you need, he gestured toward the exit.
Walk with me?
There's something I want to show you. Curious, she followed him outside to where his car waited. The drive was short, just 10 minutes into a residential neighborhood she didn't recognize. He parked in front of a modest brick house with a small front porch. What is this? She asked as they approached the front door. A possibility? He unlocked the door and stepped aside for her to enter. The interior was simple but well-maintained. Hardwood. Floors, large windows, built-in bookshelves along one wall. It felt immediately welcoming, with none of the sterile perfection she would have expected from his taste. It's lovely, she said, wandering through the open living room. Are you considering buying it? I already own it. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her reaction. It was my mother's childhood home. When the previous owners listed it last year, I couldn't bear to see it changed beyond recognition. Understanding dawned. You're renovating it as a rental property? Actually, I was thinking of living here. His statement hung in the air between them. The penthouse downtown never felt like home. This place has history, character things. I've come to value more in recent months. Elise absorbed this revelation, seeing it for the significant shift it represented. Your board would have opinions about their CEO living in this neighborhood. They've had plenty of opinions lately. He smiled wryly. Turns out I don't need their approval for my personal choices. She moved to the window, looking out at the ordinary street with its mix of well-kept and struggling homes. Why show me this now? Nathaniel crossed the room to stand beside her, close but not touching. 'Cause I want you to know who I'm becoming. Before I ask what might be possible between us, her heart quickened. And what are you becoming? Someone who understands that real value isn't measured in stock prices or square footage. His voice softened. Someone who wants to build something meaningful, not just with steel and concrete, but with choices and commitments. That's a lot of change in a short time, she observed. Though she had witnessed this evolution firsthand over their months of working together, not change so much as ... rediscovery. He turned to face her fully. My grandfather built bridges because connection mattered more than monuments. I lost sight of that for a while. Elise thought of the paper cranes in her apartment, nearly 200 now, folded one by one in quiet evenings. A wish taking shape. And what about the foundations? Are they solid enough for what you want to build? He understood her meaning. Immediately. That's what I'm asking you to help me determine. It's not as an architect or a foundation director, but as yourself, the woman who returned wallets and taught children and challenged boardrooms without flinching. The woman who is homeless, she added quietly. That part of me doesn't disappear with a job offer or a changed address. I would never want it to. He reached for her hand tentatively. That experience is part of your strength, your perspective. I'm not asking you to forget it or pretend it didn't happen. She allowed her fingers to intertwine with his, the simple, contact breaking months of careful distance. What are you asking, Nathaniel? For time? For the chance to see what we might build together without the constraints of client and consultant, benefactor and recipient, thumb-traced circles, honor palm, for permission to care about you the way I've wanted to since you folded that napkin into a crane? Elise thought of the vast differences that still existed between them, experiences that couldn't be bridged by understanding alone, privilege that couldn't simply be set aside. But she also acknowledged the genuine connection that had formed. Despite those differences, the mutual respect that had grown from their work together. I can't promise anything, she said finally. There's too much at stake. My independence, my career, your position. I'm not asking for promises. His voice was gentle. Just possibility. Side construction sounds from the mill project carried. Faintly on the summer air, hammers and saws, voices calling measurements and instructions. The sounds of something being built, piece by careful piece. Possibility, she echoed, squeezing his hand lightly, that I can offer. As they stood together in the simple house that represented both his past and potential future, Elise recognized that the foundations between them, trust, respect, shared purpose, were perhaps stronger than she had allowed herself to believe. Whether they could support something lasting remained to be seen. But for the first time, she was willing to explore the architecture of possibility. That evening, and in her rented room, she folded the 200th paper crane. Not a wish for stability this time, but for courage, the courage to build something real. Even without guarantees of its permanence. Like the mill they were transforming together, some structures were worth the risk, worth the careful, patient work of restoration.